Hi folks, I'm Tristan from Scalar Music. In this video, we'll be looking at some of the exciting new features introduced in Scalar version 3.1, which is certainly the biggest update to Scalar 3 so far. The most notable of these new features is Live Sync, which we'll be looking at in just a minute. However, there have been several updates to Scalar 3 since it launched, featuring all sorts of improvements and new features. So we'll also take some time to highlight some of those new features, just in case you missed them. First of all, let's quickly revisit audio detection, one of Scalar's most important features, which can analyze audio files and list any detected chords and related scales. In Scalar 3, you've always been able to detect audio in real time using the record button in the detect window, or use the browser to import audio files for detection. In a recent update, drag and drop detection was added to Scalar 3. So if you have an audio or MIDI file in your file browser, or somewhere in your DAW, you just need to drag it onto Scalar's interface, where it will be immediately analyzed. So a very handy update. However, I have an audio file here from one of Ableton Live's packs, which is copy protected. So unfortunately, drag and drop detection isn't going to work. So we'll need to use real-time detection to analyze the chords. Whilst this can be done using the sidechain input in the Scalar 3 instrument plugin, the easiest way to accomplish this is to add the audio file to an audio track in my DAW, then add the Scalar 3 audio effect plugin called Scalar 3 Audio to that track. Now I just need to open the detection window, choose Detect Audio, and press Record. Now it looks like these chords have been detected properly. I might quickly change the instrument sound, and I'll also enable a passage motion to give it some movement. Now to add a second instrument part to this song, I could move to the Arrange page and add a new track. And I can load any third-party instrument plugin onto that track if there's a certain sound I'm after. However, a lot of DAWs, such as Ableton Live, include their own software instruments in a proprietary format that only that DAW can host, not third-party plugin hosts like Scalar 3. This is one of the main reasons Scalar 3 lets you assign a MIDI output channel to any of its tracks, which you can then route to a particular MIDI track in your DAW. Unfortunately, this Scalar 3 audio plugin I use for detection is an audio effect plugin, not an instrument plugin, so it doesn't have a MIDI output. You'll see it won't appear as a potential MIDI input source for my MIDI track. So one workaround might be to simply drag the MIDI data from Scalar 3 into the MIDI track in our DAW. Whilst this works, it's not ideal as it is a static MIDI clip which we can no longer modify using Scalar. And whilst it's in tune with our current Scalar chord progression, if I was to modify any of these chords, the MIDI clip wouldn't automatically adapt to those new chords. So a better option is to take advantage of Scalar 3.1's new Live Sync feature. First, we need to open our existing Scalar 3 audio plugin and open the main track's 3-dot menu. Then from the Live Sync menu, we choose the lead option, which specifies this Scalar 3 instance as the Live Sync leader. A pop-up window will appear indicating that doing this will potentially overwrite the main track chords on other Scalar instances, which we'll talk about more in a minute. For the moment, let's accept this and say OK. And you can see this instance is now clearly labeled as the leader in the left side of section C. Now I can add a new Scalar 3 instrument plugin to a MIDI track in my DAW, and you'll notice the main track is automatically populated with the same chords as my leader instance. And this instance is now listed as a follower. In follow mode, any changes I make to the main track on my leader are immediately reflected in real time on all of my followers. In follow mode, you are still given a lot of freedom to make changes without interrupting the live sync, such as adding tracks, adjusting their clips, and modifiers. But if I try to make any changes to the main track chords, I'll receive a warning that this will disconnect the instance from Live Sync. And I can either press cancel, which will undo the change and stay in follow mode, or press OK to confirm, after which this instance will detach from Live Sync and is no longer listed as a follower. But if I change my mind at some point and would like this instance of Scalar to rejoin the party, I can just open the Live Sync menu and choose Follow. So this is how easy it is to synchronize chords across multiple instances of Scalar, even across different plugin types. So in our case, we have an audio effect synced to an instrument plugin. So now we can take advantage of the Scalar 3 instrument plugin's MIDI output and use it to control an Ableton Live instrument on another MIDI track. And this also applies to the Scalar 3 control plugin available in Logic Pro. In fact, you can even sync instances across different DAWs. This Scalar 3 control plugin running in Logic is currently synced to my Scalar 3 audio effect plugin running in Ableton Live in the background. Now the reason our new Scalar instance is automatically opened in follow mode is because autosync is enabled by default. This means if you add a new instance of Scalar to a project that already contains a leader, the new instance will immediately enter follow mode and mirror the main track chords of that leader. In addition to this, activating leader mode on a Scalar instance will put any other instances of Scalar with autosync enabled into follow mode. This is likely how you want things to work for the most part, but if there is one or multiple instances of Scalar which you would like to exclude from live sync, you can simply disable autosync on those instances. Now you can make changes to the chord progression on those instances of Scalar and not worry about them being overwritten when putting another Scalar instance into leader mode, as that will have no effect on any instance of Scalar with autosync disabled. If you create a new instance of Scalar when there is already a leader on another track and you don't want this new instance to stay in follow mode, you can simply right-click on the Scalar logo in the top left and choose New Session. This not only resets Scalar to a blank instance, but will also deactivate live sync. And you can see that this instance is no longer in follow mode. Another great new addition to Scalar 3.1 is the bass follow articulation, which makes creating simple bass lines incredibly easy. When adding a new track, just select a bass follow from the articulations menu. This behaves very much like the existing chord follow option, which mirrors the main track chords. But with bass follow, it only includes the lowest note of each chord. This generally works well, as for most chords, this will be the root note of the chord. But it will still respect your inverted or slash chords, such as this C over a D chord where the bass track is playing the D rather than the C. However, bass follow tracks also contain several modifiers, including length. By default, bass follow tracks play legato with a series of long connected notes. But you can shorten these notes by reducing the length modifier, all the way down to a series of staccato notes if you like. And if you only want to adjust the length of one or several notes, you can use the scissor tool to split the bass follow clip, and changes will only affect the selected section. Bass follow tracks also include an inversion modifier, which will cycle the bass follow note through the various main track chord notes. This is great if you'd like the bass to play a note other than the lowest note of the chord, say to create an inverted chord. But this also potentially extends the use case for bass follow tracks beyond just simply creating bass parts. You could, for example, create multiple bass follow tracks, each with a different inversion setting and a different instrument sound, effectively creating a Divisi output mode for your main track chords. So they are tremendously flexible and could be considered a note follow track rather than bass follow tracks. But we refer to them as bass follow tracks because they do default to the lowest note of the chord. Scalar 3.1 also includes a variety of new useful editing features. For example, when adding chords to your main track or moving chords within the main track, you'll see some nice visual feedback regarding where the chords will end up. If you add one or multiple chords in between existing chords, you'll see an arrow appear indicating the chords to the right will be moved back to make space for the new chords. Whereas dragging a chord on top of another chord will simply replace that chord. If the replacement chord was also taken from the main track, the two chords will simply swap positions. And if you drag a chord to your main track slightly overlapping another chord, the existing chord will be automatically cropped to accommodate the new chord. If you have two chords right next to each other, extending the length of one of these chords will automatically crop the other chord, which makes little resizing changes much easier and less fiddly to accomplish. Plus, in addition to all of this, there are many smaller features which we haven't covered in this video, such as an integrated tutorial which you'll see when you first launch the app, but you can always revisit this via the Help menu, accessed by clicking on the scalar logo. Custom VST folder locations are now supported when scanning for plugins, and Scalar 3 now includes ASIO driver support when running Scalar 3 standalone on Windows. So this has been a quick look at some of the exciting new features in Scalar 3.1, and some of the other new features which have been added to Scalar 3 since it launched. Thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos coming soon.